What's going on, movie fans? My name is Michael Weir. I like talking about movies, and we've officially made it through another month in 2024. That's right, July 2024 has come to an end, and just like we do at the end of every month on this channel, it's time for me to rank all of the brand new movie releases that I had a chance to see from worst to best. But just like my other ranked videos, this isn't just about my opinion. I'd love to know your opinions as well. So if you saw several movies in the month of July, well, throw your ranked list of worst to best in the comment section down below, and let's talk about it. My list probably won't match your list, and that's okay because all movies are different and everybody interprets them a little bit differently. So I'd love to know how my list matches up to yours. And if this is the first time you're finding my channel, well, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel, check out the rest of the content. I've got a ton of movie reviews on my channel, a ton of ranked lists on my channel, including a huge 2023 ranked best to worst video that I think you'll enjoy, plus a bunch of top 10 best and worst videos that I did at the end of last year. And like we're doing in this video at the end of every month starting last year, I rank all the brand new releases that I had a chance to see. So if you like what you see here today, you could check out some of the other content on my channel, and I think you'll like that too. With all that said, let's rank July 2024 brand new movie releases from worst to best. Alright guys, so I saw 8 brand new movies in July of 24, and you know what? This is the first month that I could say at the month-end wrap-up video that all the movies that I had a chance to see were good. There was nothing just horrible or nothing glaringly bad that I wanted to walk away from and never talk about again, which is the first time this entire year I've been able to say that. So it's nice to say that all 8 of these movies I'm going to trend more positive on than I normally would if something was the worst of the worst. So when I say at number 8 the worst movie is Despicable Me 4, I don't necessarily mean it's a bad movie. It's just, well, you guys know how I feel about animated films, and it's more for kids than adults, and I only ended up seeing it because I took my kids to see it. So when I say it's number 8 and the worst, it's not really a bad movie. It's just not really made for me. But other than the fact that it's animation and it's also made for kids, there's also not much plot in Despicable Me 4. You have Gru, who makes an enemy at the beginning of the film by taking him down, working for the good guys now. That guy says he's gonna get his revenge, and by the end of the movie, he does try to get his revenge. And you see Gru and his family, but you would have liked to see more of his family. And is it me, or was the Minion movie more about Gru, and the Despicable Me movies are somehow more about the Minions? I don't know why they do that, but here we are. I mean, I get why the Minions sell stuff. It's just you'd think the Minion movies would be more about the Minions and Despicable Me would be more about Gru and his family, but it seems like they flip-flop. Am I the only one who thinks that? Let's move on. Coming in at number 7, guys, we have Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, which is the 4th movie in the Beverly Hills Cop franchise. And for those of you who may have watched my upcoming movies for July video, you know in that video I said I wasn't sure if I was actually going to check this movie out because I had never seen any of the previous Beverly Hills Cop franchise movies before. But I had some extra time at the beginning of July, so I checked out the entire Beverly Hills Cop franchise, including Axel F, and so I felt like I could understand this movie a little bit more had I just not jumped right into it. It is a movie that maybe you could jump right into. They kind of explain everything right away, but if you want a little bit of nostalgia for some of the characters, it's probably best to watch the entire franchise. That said, I think the Beverly Hills Cop franchise is fine, but not one I'm necessarily going to rush back to anytime soon, and that's kind of how I feel about this movie. So again, I'm throwing in that good category of movies that came out in July, even though it's at number 7, but again, it's just not a movie that I'm going to rush back to. I think Eddie Murphy's fine. I think some of the legacy characters in this movie are fine. Some of the new characters they bring in are fine, but nothing in this movie like made me say, oh my God, I've got to show this to all my friends, or I've got to show my wife this movie. It's just like, it's okay. It's just another Eddie Murphy cop movie, and it was fine. At number 6 is a movie I just had a chance to check out recently, and it actually came out in May. So is it cheating a little bit to put it on the July list? Kind of, but you guys know how it is. If I miss something throughout the year, I always tag it into whatever ranked month video I am doing next. And so the movie I watched is called What You Wish For, and that's a movie about a chef who's down on his luck. He goes to visit a friend, and when he gets out there, he finds that the friend has like the best life imaginable. He's a very profitable chef. He works for some very rich people who have him cook these exotic dinners for very rich people, and he's just seemingly living the high life. And his friend, who's down on his luck, the chef, the star of this movie, he feels like he wishes he had his friend's life. Then after a very dark turn of events that I won't spoil here, he gets a chance to have his friend's life, and he gets to cook this exotic dinner and get paid all of this money, but then things get even darker and he realizes he's way over his head. With that said, I'm not going to spoil the movie. I think that this movie was going for something great, and I think the first 2 two acts built some incredible tension throughout the film. However, when it gets to that final act and you go, okay, you've brought me all the way here, how are you going to close this thing? It sort of flatlines. And that's what I put in my quick reaction. That's still how I feel today, a day after watching the movie. And I will say that that is my biggest issue with this film. It's not necessarily how they built up the suspense, because my wife had some issues with that, because there were some inconsistencies in the plot. I was willing to look past that, but when you get to that end, you're like, okay, you've got all these characters in place, you've got all these pieces of the chessboard, how are you gonna do this thing? They just sort of flatline. And I was like, that's disappointing, because it was a really cool premise and one that I hadn't really seen before. And I was like, okay, what would happen to you if you put yourself in this situation? You did this to yourself, you just have to constantly live this lie because you're assuming your friend's identity. How's this gonna go down for this guy? So there was a lot they could have done with it, and unfortunately they just let it fizzle out. At number 5 is a movie that I wish was a little bit better. Again, it's in the good category because I think there's a lot of good in this movie, but it's not in the great category yet. Those are still to come. But at number 5 we have Twisters, and Twisters is a film that of course is a sequel, but only in name, to the Twister movie that came out in the 90s. Twisters stars Glenn Powell as a tornado wrangler who happens upon a girl who is a tornado scientist. She's trying to make a difference in the world while he just seems to be sort of a YouTuber who's trying to get clicks on YouTube because he shoots fireworks into tornadoes. And of course they have a little bit of a romance throughout this film where first they don't like each other, then they start to sort to understand each other, then it turns out he's got a heart of gold. And so you kind of have all of the rom-com tropes to this movie while it's also trying to be a disaster film. Now the disaster film part, that's what worked for me. I thought the tornadoes were awesome. There was a few tornadoes in this movie that were terrifying on the big screen that I saw this on. So to those disaster moments, I give this movie props. But even some of the character motivation in those disaster moments, it started to get hard to feel bad for some of these characters when they were constantly driving into tornadoes. I was like, what are you doing here? You're constantly putting yourself in danger. Whether it's for clicks on YouTube or science, whatever you want to call it, it's getting harder and harder for me to hope you get out of this situation when your dumbass just keeps putting yourself in those situations. And that's kind of what the first movie was like too, so I guess maybe this movie was right on par. If you're a big Twister fan, maybe you'll also really enjoy Twisters. Again, it's a movie that I thought was fine, it was good, but not one I'm going to revisit anytime soon. And that'll lead us to number 4, and at number 4 we have Longlegs. And Longlegs might be the most overhyped movie on horror Twitter. And what I mean by that is that from the get-go, when the early screenings and early reactions came out for Longlegs, people were like, I was throwing up in the theater, I was terrified to leave my seat. And I was like, all right, there's always a bit of like, you're too crazy about this movie, so let's see what happens when we go in. But I did buy into some of the hype. I thought, man, this might be the scariest movie of 24. And so I went into this movie kind of thinking that, and that's definitely not what I got. Now, I will say that I enjoyed the sort of homage to Silence of the Lamb that this movie was paying, because this movie opens as more of a thriller suspense movie about a serial killer who's taunting a female FBI agent. And I was like, okay, I'm on board for this. The serial killer is played by Nicolas Cage, so let's do it. And there are some really creepy moments that happen at the beginning of this movie involving the serial killer and the FBI agent. They're sort of playing cat and mouse. And I thought that was the direction this movie was going to go, and I was all locked in and ready for it. However, when you get to the final portion of this movie, like the last act, it really flips and becomes a different kind of movie. Now, I said what kind of movie it became in my review, and somebody called me out and they were like, hey, you kind of spoiled that this movie turned into a different thing than it was. And I was like, oh, all right. Well, then I won't say it again. So I guess it's a spoiler, so I won't say what this movie becomes, but it really just changes within the horror genre, becomes a different style movie, and I didn't like that this movie did that. I appreciated what they gave us in the first act and a half of this film. It was very grounded, and then it's not very grounded when you get toward the end of this movie, and so they had like two different ideas, meshed them together, and that didn't work for me personally. I thought Nicolas Cage was great in this movie as the serial killer. I thought Micah Monroe was great in this movie as the FBI agent. I thought Oz Perkins did a great job building suspense in the first act and a half of this film. But again, when you get to the last act of this movie, it sort of started to be a different movie, and that didn't work for me at all. So again, a good movie, but I promise we're about to get to the greats. As far as Longlegs, the last thing I'll say is that this movie did creep me out, and it is one I want to give another chance in the future. And I think that on a second watch, it could move up or down on my ranked list, just depending on how I'm feeling that day. Now, especially that I know where this movie movie goes. Like, it could change for me in the future. All right, guys, made it to the top 3, and these 3 movies I think are great. On this list where I said so many were good and there's some great films, these are the great films. These are the ones that I want to rewatch again. These are the ones that I want to own on physical media and put on my shelf. Well, usually I point back there, but clearly I'm not in my normal review room. This is a hotel room, so imagine my shelf is back there. But they are movies that I plan on owning physical media, putting on my shelf, and showing friends. They're that good. And at number 3, we have one of my most anticipated movies of 2024, Maxine. Maxine, of course, starring Mia Goth as the title character of Maxine, and this movie takes place after the events of X, which is a movie that came out in 2022. And 22 was a weird year for this franchise because we not only got X, which I loved, was one of my favorite movies that entire year, but later that year we got Pearl, which was a prequel to that film, and then they said, oh yeah, and Maxine is coming later. We ended up not getting it in 2023, but we did get it this year. And I loved so much about this movie. I thought it was a great way to sort of end cap the Maxine portion of this trilogy. And I think that I would like to see Ti West go into this universe more, maybe delve into different characters, because in each movie he's brought in new characters that were all intriguing in their own way. In this movie, he brings in Kevin Bacon's character, who is a slime bag. And it's nice to see Kevin Bacon just keep getting these horrible roles because he fills them out so well. And I like that. But yeah, he brings in new characters, and you could tell that he's got a lot of life he could breathe into this franchise still, but it was nice seeing Maxine sort of get a closing to her story in this film. In the movie X, when she drives off the property at the end of that film, I had a lot of questions still, but this movie answered a lot of them. I also really liked the gore in this movie, and I thought it lived up to the previous movies and all the gore that those movies had in them. Where this movie faltered for me a little bit was its predictability, because you could kind of see from the beginning, or at least I could, with the path that this movie was taking. The person who was being the Night Stalker or killing people and trying to make it look like he was the Night Stalker, you could kind of see who that person was going to be from the beginning of this film, and by the end I was just like, oh yeah, I predicted that. So the movie was a little predictable in that regard, but I thought Mia Goth did a great job, and I also would have liked to see them use Pearl and the Norman Bates house a little bit more. There's a moment where you see Pearl in one of the windows of the Bates house, and at one point Maxine has to run in there to hide from Kevin Bacon's character, and I thought, okay, it's about to get really good because she's either going to be seeing things or they're going to find a way to bring Pearl into this somehow. It's going to be really creepy, and they just sort of let that slide. And I wonder if at any point they had thought of doing something more with that scene and they just decided not to do it, because it seemed like a perfect opportunity for a really good scare, and we just didn't get that. But with those negatives aside, I think this movie was great. Again, a great ending to the Maxine portion of this story, and I'd love to see more from Ti West in this bloody universe going forward. That'll lead us to number 2. This is a film that I have very little to no notes on, and it is Oddity. Oddity is a film that caught me completely off guard. It was a limited release. It's a Shudder film, so you could probably find it there now or very soon. But Oddity is a movie about a girl who goes to avenge the death of her twin sister, who she believed was murdered. But this girl is not only blind, but a psychic. So she uses some cursed objects to extract her revenge on those people. Now that seems like a pretty straightforward plot, and one that you're not going to get a lot of mystery out of, but there's a lot of mystery in this movie. And honestly, I couldn't predict where this thing was going at all. Every twist, every turn that it took, I was like, okay, so how are they going to do this now? Or how are they going to do that? And then they would twist it, and it would just take me completely off guard. There's also some phenomenal uses of jump scares in this movie. I'm not a jump scares person. I don't mind them in a film. I like them when they're used the right way, and I feel like Oddity used them the right way. And speaking of using things the right way, this movie had a very low budget, and while my only negative is that towards the end, that low budget does start to show a bit, I loved how they used darkness in this film. You had a very dark house, not very well lit, and they used that to their advantage in this movie to sort of creep out the viewer and keep a very tense and scary atmosphere throughout this entire film, because most of this film takes place in this house where her sister was murdered, and so there's all these different little tricks they can do throughout this house since it's so dark. There's also a moment with a video camera that genuinely creeped me out, and I thought that moment was one of the best well-placed jump scares I'd seen in a long time. So Oddity is number 2, and it is a great film that I highly recommend to everyone. And finally, guys, at number 1, you know what it's gonna be. I'm wearing the shirt. It's Deadpool and Wolverine. This movie was everything I wanted it to be and everything I needed it to be. Seeing Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman out there as Deadpool and Wolverine was everything I wanted it to be. I mean that. It was wonderful. It had some great comedy in this film, had some great emotion in this film, and those cameos were so awesome. Now listen, cameos don't make make the movie. So if there was just cameo fest the movie, this movie wouldn't have been great. But like I said, it had some incredible moments of violence, had some incredible moments that were just hilarious. And then Hugh Jackman as Wolverine brought in that emotion that Hugh Jackman can do, and you believe his character. It was my most anticipated movie of 2024. It's currently my favorite movie of 2024. And of course, for this list, it is my favorite movie in July of 2024. But that's just my ranked list of movies from July of 2024 from worst to best. And like I said earlier, guys, if you've got a ranked list of movies from July, they'll throw those down in the comment section down below. Let's talk about them. Let's see how your list compares up to my list, because I'd love to see where we differ. Maybe you agree with some of the points I made. Maybe you disagree with some of the points I made. I'd love to know how you feel about these films. Finally, guys, if you like this video and you want to watch more, don't forget to hit that like button, because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. All right, guys, we get to the end of my July 2024 brand new movies ranked from worst to best. I love making these videos no matter where I'm at, whether it's at home, in my movie theater room, or here in a hotel where the audio's bad, the chair is very creaky, and I haven't disturbed the bed yet because it's still night one. But with that said though, guys, if you like this video and you want to check out more of the content on my channel, well, I've got all of my best to worst 2024 right there, and I've got all of my 2024 movie reviews right there.